Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's committee of the whole. I'd like to welcome everybody back after the break. I hope everybody had a great break. I'd like to welcome Mayor Ireland, Councillor, CEO Gibbon, and staff to the meeting today, as well as the public that is watching. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Jasper National Park and the Municipality of Jasper are on Treaty 6 in 8 territories, as well as Métis Region 4. This land is traditional territory, meeting ground, gathering place, traveling route, and home to the Neza, Biaka, and Nishabi, Shwagnik, Suni Dakota, and Métis. The Municipality of Jasper acknowledges the lands of these territories to honor the relationship Indigenous people have with this land, to remind us of our responsibility and obligations to this place and to Indigenous people, and to affirm our accountability to address the ongoing impacts of colonization that continue to affect Indigenous people today. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 9:31. Everybody has today's agenda in front of them. Is there any additions to the agenda? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. With concurrence of Council, I would like to add 2 items. One being a very brief in-camera item falling under rubric of strategic priorities, I think. And the second, I wonder whether we might add under new business 7.4 an item concerning the Jasper Municipal Leasehold Asset Society.
So we'll make the in-camera to appointment. Thank you, Mayor Ireland. And I have somebody that will approve the additions to the agenda. Councillor Wexler, thank you. Now to approve the agenda with the additions. Councillor Hall, thank you. All in favor? So we have the July 11th Committee of the Whole meetings. They have already been approved. Is there any business arising from these minutes? Seeing as none, then we'll move on. We have no delegations today, and it looks like we have no respondents today. So we will start with new business 7.1, procurement policy. I'll hand it over to CAO Gibbon.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Keller. Council, I'm here today with a follow-up to your May 16th direction. On May 16th, Council directed administration to return to a future committee of the whole meeting with revisions to the municipality procurement policy to require the advertisement of the municipality Jasper RFPs on the municipal website. In addition to legislative sites, including the Alberta Purchasing Connection. So that was the motion that was passed. Administration has drafted amendments to our procurement policy, which is currently B20. We're proposing that it be renamed to policy B120, just to reflect the change, so we can keep some version control there. I've attached what I call a updated policy to the package. You can see in red the addition of local notice. And the intent is really to ensure that there is a higher level of local awareness to procurement opportunities where the municipalities are seeking services or supplies. I should note that this change is specific in what I understood to be the major gap. Our local smaller businesses may or may not be regularly watching the provincially mandated Alberta Purchasing Connection. So there's a system there. We have some requirements under provincial and federal trade agreements that we have to ensure that certain opportunities over a certain threshold value are advertised in a certain way. And well, the municipality has always, at least certainly since 2019, met that standard that's required under the rules that apply to us. This identifies an opportunity for us to go one step further to increase local awareness of opportunities to do business with the municipality. So it doesn't change any of our legislative requirements. It's essentially a proposal for municipality to go a little bit further. In the attached policy, you can see the additions of section 4, 4.1, and 4.2. And I'll just cover them very briefly. The provision of local notice says that in addition to meeting all advertising requirements of provincial legislation and relevant trade agreements, the municipality shall also endeavor to provide the local Jasper market with reasonable notice of procurement opportunities issued through Alberta Purchasing Connection. Local note, and then 4.2 goes on to say local notice shall be accomplished through the following means: posting links to all procurement opportunities issued through Alberta Purchasing Connection on the municipal website, and emailing notification of procurement opportunities issued through Alberta Purchasing Connection to all members of council and the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce. So the change to our process would sort of be threefold. First, we'd create a new section on the website that would be procurement opportunities, or that's sort of a working title. I'm not sure that maybe the general public would understand what procurement opportunities necessarily means, but we can work on that. But essentially creating a new section on the website where we would, in essence, be cross-posting. So we wouldn't stop posting on Alberta Purchasing Connection, because that's a requirement, but we would ensure that somebody who wasn't aware of Alberta Purchasing Connection and went on the municipal website said, hey, what's out there? How could I do business with the municipality? That they'd be able to find links to Alberta Purchasing Connection where they would then be able to go through and follow on that opportunity. Additionally, we would ensure that members of council and the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce are aware of new opportunities that are coming up. And then that way, we're essentially spreading a wider net. I think as administration, if we're following up directly with individual businesses, that could be seen to be providing preferential treatment. But if we're providing essentially the news out into the public sphere, and council members are sharing that information around, the Chamber of Commerce is sharing that information around, then certainly I don't think there's anything untoward about that. It's essentially just casting broader net. There are certainly positives, I think, that we can all appreciate about ensuring that there's more local notice. When local businesses understand what opportunities are available to them, gives them a chance to grow. It helps the government by increasing our revenue through taxes by ensuring that local businesses are sustainable. And there are also some potential risks that we have to watch out for. The municipality, like all municipalities in Alberta and in Canada, are expressly prohibited from providing a preference for local procurement. So you can't favor your own local businesses to the exclusion of other businesses. So we have to ensure that our evaluations are objective, but there is nothing that says that we can't do more to ensure our local businesses are aware of the opportunities. They have to compete fairly and on an equitable basis with other businesses, but we can do more to ensure that they're aware. We do have to, of course, be cautious about ensuring that there's no outside perception that effort of more local promotion is interpreted as local preference. And ultimately, I think the philosophical idea of why not have a local preference, and again, the main reason is because that's baked into the rules that apply to us. But the more philosophical version of that is that taxpayers are, on the whole, probably better served when governments receive competitive bids for services and items. So we want to ensure that there's that competition there, and that ultimately leads to better quality product for the municipality at lower prices. Again, in theory, but that's the basis of saying there needs to be an objective evaluation, and that there shouldn't be a local preference. So those are the rules that we have to work within. The proposed changes to the procurement policy, I believe, don't run afoul of any of those rules for local preference. It's just increasing local notice, which I believe was the request from council. And the recommendation from administration is that the committee recommend council approve policy B120, procurement policy as presented. I'm happy to answer any questions that may have.
Thank you, CEO Gibbon. Council, questions from Mr. Gibbon? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Kelleher, MP. Firstly, let me say thank you, Mr. Gibbon and team for bringing this forward. It matches very closely what I had in mind when I made the motion back in May. And we're all aware of the particular incident that gave rise to this. And although the process has been described as flawed, I think we followed the process exactly as it was laid out. As the briefing note indicates, refinements to this policy are relatively recent. 2019, previous council looked really closely at this particular procurement policy, but didn't focus on this aspect. And when that issue came to light, it does reflect well on council that we moved immediately to strengthen the policy, but not to say that it was previously flawed. So I thank you for the work. It's certainly what I had in mind. I do have a couple of questions about wording. So the new section, local notice, I can appreciate the softer wording in 4.1. It's mandatory in the sense that it says shall, but then it's shall endeavor. So we're going to try. And the real meat comes in 4.2, which says what we in fact shall do. In 4.1, I might suggest some slightly different wording to be more prescriptive on the municipality, so that the municipality shall make available to the local Jasper market notice of procurement opportunities. So we are actually going to do something. We're not just going to endeavor to do it. We're going to do it. And what we're going to do is make notice available. I would take out the word reasonable because that can be debated by anybody, but we will make notice available and we will do it exactly as we said in 4.2. In 4.2, my only question is whether Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce has been contacted about this. I mean, if we're going to have a policy that implicates another body, have they been given a heads up and they receptive?
Deputy Mayor Keller, MP for Mayor Ireland. So, Your Worship, no, they haven't. At the administrative level, we essentially see this providing the information out, and then it's up to those other parties to decide how they wish to do that. Certainly, the Chamber has a relationship with their members. They have newsletters, they have their own communications channels. We wouldn't impose on them about how they should get information to their members. It's certainly not for us to presume. But the idea that the municipality works with our local business community, the Chamber seems to be that body that represents the whole business community, and at an administrative level, identifying individual businesses to email directly to them by purchasing was a bit challenging. So the answer directly is no, and we don't see it being a significant burden. It was essentially email over when there's a new opportunity, and then it will be up to the Chamber to decide how or if they wish to circulate that to their members. They may choose to send it to only the members that it's relevant to. They may choose to put it in the newsletter. They may choose, but that's certainly would get to that.
But in any event, it'll be on our website. So that any work by a third-party agency will just enhance what we're already doing. Thank you for that. I have one other set of questions, if I may. The section that starts, well, section 8 of the policy, the signing authority matrix, that's where council spent most of its time 4 years ago working on that matrix. And in the particular instance that brought this back to the attention of council in May, one of the concerns is addressed in, I think, subsection 5 of section 8. Well, that was the one that was relevant this time. Goods or services, $75,000 or greater, construction $200,000 or greater. And the procurement process, paragraph B, provides a minimum of 3 written quotations or proposals to be received. And of course, as we discussed, sometimes that just doesn't happen. But the policy itself doesn't provide an option, but there is an option provided in the administrative procedures. But it seems to me the policy would be strengthened if we had, say, an asterisk after that to refer to the procedures, because otherwise we are set up for a situation where administrative procedures can in fact override policy without permission. So I would suggest that maybe, and it occurs in a number of cases under Section 8, but maybe where it says a minimum of some number of quotes must be received, have an asterisk, subject to the application of the administrative procedures, so that we don't have a conflict between council saying one thing by policy and administration implementing it under a different set of rules. So I'm not saying stop the process. I understand that sometimes, even though we would prefer 3, we only get 2, or maybe we only get 1. And we can't be stalled forever because of that. But I think there should be a tie-in between what council has permitted by policy and what we expect administration to do when they receive something that is out of the ordinary. Thank you. This was my comment.
Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller. And first, I'd like to apologize to you and the council for being late for the meeting. Things happen in life and the way things go. First, I'd like to note Mayor Ireland's astute review of 4.1, where we need to clean that up a little bit to make it a little more precise as to what we will do. I would like to comment on 4.2 though, and specifically, I don't want to exclude the use of the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce. However, I'm not certain that's the best way to reach out to the business community. They do represent a number of businesses in our town. However, we shouldn't rely on them to be the purveyor of our messaging. One thing that Mayor Ireland did ask for when we did review this was that there be a specific reference to how we advertise locally. And unfortunately, reading through this, I don't see any reference when advertising is triggered. And Mr. Gibbon, I hope you can, as I go through the chart of the various levels of procurement, nothing in any of that area says we will advertise locally or make an effort to make sure that the entire population, not just the business community, know that we have a contract. So I think we need to re-trigger some of these processes to ensure that it complies with what I think the intent of this was to provide clear advertising locally. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. CEO Gibbon.
Sure. Deputy Mayor Keller, I'm for Councillor Melnick. So the intention of the addition in the local notice is, and as you read it, there's specific reference to notice of procurement opportunities issued through Alberta Purchasing Connection. So the municipality buys everything from $5 items, a credit card, to, under the policy, there are a number of different items that are not posted to Alberta Purchasing Connection. And the intention is to provide the ability for administration to manage the business effectively. There's certain stuff that you need to buy, that you just go and buy it. And so I think the policy is intentionally set up to enable the municipality, where possible, to make its own purchasing decisions that don't meet the threshold of public procurement under the Alberta purchasing, the trade agreements. There's a certain threshold that once you start to do this amount of money, that's covered in the policy, where Alberta Purchasing Connection, the use of that specific tool becomes required under the policy and under the trade laws. The intention of public notice is to only apply to those situations where we're using Alberta Purchasing Connection. That seemed to be the gap. I'm not aware of a situation in my time here where there was any other concern about the municipality's procurement practices. It seemed that this particular concern was specifically around the fact that Alberta Purchasing Connection is not something that everybody locally, as a local business owner, engages with on a regular basis. We, in fact, might be the only, local party, well, probably are the only local party that, issues procurement opportunities on that. And so I think the desire is explicitly to ensure that the local community is more aware of what happens on Alberta Purchasing Connection. Notwithstanding, there's nothing that prevents any local business from signing up today on Alberta Purchasing Connection, signing up to receive notice of procurement opportunities that are issued within a local geographic area like Jasper. So that certainly is possible. What we're talking about is in those situations where we use that specific tool, taking additional steps to provide additional notice out into the local community. So the question about where does it apply? This new sort of advertising requirement only on procurements issued through Alberta Purchasing Connection.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller, and thank you, Mr. Gibbon. I think I'd be more comfortable if we included specific verbiage in Section 5 or goods and services $75,000 or greater and construction of $200,000 or greater, included specifically advertising locally. We do see that there is some mention of advertising and posted through the Alberta Purchasing Connection in accordance to our agreements, but we don't specifically say that we'll advertise locally. And I think that's the level that I'm worried about. You're correct in that there's lots of opportunities for local businesses to approach the municipality to supply a variety of things. But I think when we get into those higher dollar amounts, it probably would be prudent for us to include a specific mention of local advertising. And I think council should consider that as we move forward in our discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Monique. I have a question for CEO Gibbon. Has administration considered for these larger purchasing, putting ads in the paper that in order to for the businesses and the public to be aware? Because as Councillor Monique mentioned, not everyone is a member of the chamber. A lot of smaller businesses aren't. And, sometimes like we see stuff for across Canada, we have stuff coming up. So it was in the paper, and I think, the awareness there would be great.
So administration did consider that. If council would like us to do that, then we would have to look at the budget implications. So there's a cost to advertising in the local newspapers. Certainly something we can do. Administration could have a look at how many procurements we do in this category and what the annual cost of that would be. So we started off with what would be free. And that's the basis of the suggestions policy. We're in control of our own website, and we can certainly email out to the organization that's supposed to be the representative of business in our community. We could also advertise in the newspaper at a cost. So we started to add a cost factor. If council wishes us to do that, that's certainly something we can do. The budget implications, we would have to look at how many procurements are issued each year and figure out what that cost would be. So there's a cost implication. That's why administration didn't recommend that. Additionally, there's a time implication. So as we know, the newspaper has certain publishing timelines. They're a weekly newspaper. And so in order to hit their weekly publishing of their weekly publishing deadline, administration would need to have our details in advance to them. So again, it starts to add a time constraint. So when we're looking at an additional, potentially a couple of weeks, it does start to make the entire process more complicated and start to add additional bureaucratic burden, which administration doesn't immediately identify. That isn't our default, to add more bureaucracy and slow down processes. Ideally, we'd like to keep the processes moving relatively quickly. And our understanding was that there was this need in this niche area. The council feels that advertising through the local paper and the associated time and cost is the right thing to do. then absolutely that's something we could add, and council could add a reference to that. I suggest likely under in that section 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Melvin and Councillor Melvin.
Thank you for the, just want to follow up. Typically, I think on the Alberta Purchasing Connection, there's a 2 or 3 week posting period. And just for clarification, I'm not certain.
Deputy Mayor Keller, I'm not certain that there's a typical. It's up to the entity that's posting the opportunity how long they wish to have it open for.
So just as a follow-up to the comments about delays and so on, if part of the process is as soon as it hits the Alberta Purchasing Corporation, we post or we place an ad, there is no delay. So it runs kind of coincides. So I don't know if that's going to be a hindrance. Certainly the cost that you identify and the cost of putting together the ad and those administrative costs are something that council will have to put together. And I fully agree that, you know, we should weigh that when we look at this revision to the policy.
Councillor Wexler, sorry about that.
The Mayor Ireland had identified the concern with reasonable notice. And I wondered if we use the word simultaneously, the municipality shall also simultaneously provide the local Jasper market, if that would be a way of making it more clear than the reasonable notice.
See, okay.
Deputy Mayor Keller, and just so in terms of what I had heard from Mayor Ireland and how I would suggest amending 4.1, I think it can be accomplished to be more direct and less subjective by a couple of simple changes. It currently reads, well, in addition to meeting all advertising requirements of provincial legislation and relevant trade agreements, the municipality shall also endeavor to provide. The suggestion would be the municipality shall provide. So just deleting the words shall endeavor to, I think they're not useful. I think that says that there's no choice, as the municipality shall do it. So the municipality shall provide the local Jasper market with, it currently reads reasonable notice. And we just say notice. So I think this it can be strengthened just by those 2 simple deletions. For Councillor Waxer, I think simultaneous notice implies that it happens exactly the same moment, which might start to say, well, we did one thing a week in advance of the other thing. So I think the intent is very clear. Council is in the policy directing that we shall provide notice to the local market. I think that's clear and direct. And if council sees another way or that it can be strengthened or some more specificity that you'd like to add, certainly happy to take those revisions, but that's how I would have revised based on the discussion so far.
Thank you, Senator Goodwin. Councillor Demotta.
Well, I'm just wondering to go even further. Oh, thank you very much, Deputy Keller. Through you to Mr. Gibbon, has the social media channels also been considered in your deliberations on the wording in here? Like, for an example, 4.2A, purchasing connection on the municipal website, its own social media channels, and
certainly that's something we could add. Administration didn't identify that. We are talking about opportunities over 200,000, 75,000 or 200,000. My direct assessment of the utility of social media would be that that's not where you do professional business. Would it be a significant step to add a post about those? No, not really. Would it add any significant value to our process? I think it would be questionable. I think the most likely result of that would be people commenting and saying, I can't believe the municipality is spending money on blank. Again, just I think to talk about what we really do see on social media, for every one useful referral that would come from that, something like, oh, hey, that's great. I'm going to bid on that thing of $75,000 or $200,000. I think the vast majority of things that we would receive from that and the council would hear from that would be people going, I can't believe you're spending my money. Because that seems to be the vast majority of comments on social media.
Go ahead, Councillor Demona.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. That's why I asked because the local media, as far as newsprint or whatever, was considered. So, that's why I asked the question, and I'm okay with that. It sort of makes sense to me. And I just thought in lieu of advertising papers, it was a little bit more financially reasonable to go that way. But understanding that angle, I appreciate. It's probably not the best route to be advertising that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions from the streamer? Arrow.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just arising from Councillor Waxer's question and Mr. Gibbons' response. While I appreciate succinctness in the response that you gave, my concern was to get rid of the word provide as well, because what we do is make something available. But the issue that we had was, even though it was available, we had a constituent say, well, I didn't get it. And if we use the word provide, that suggests something closer to spoon feeding. What our obligation is to make it available. It's like you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So we are simply saying there's water over there, help yourself. But we're not providing the water. We're providing notice of access. And that is why, to me, those words make a difference. Because if we say that we shall provide the notice, then I think we leave ourselves open to the argument by somebody saying, well, I didn't get it. You didn't provide it to me. But that's not what we intend. We intend simply to make it available, and we define how we're going to do that. We're going to do it on our website and potentially through the chamber and maybe with further discussion through media. But our obligation is to make it available. But we can't be just handing it to everybody. They have to do something. And so it may seem like it's only semantics, but I think it's important that we really be clear about our obligation. And that obligation is to make sure that people can, if they're interested, go find out what contracts we've tendered. But we can't be held accountable for everybody having actually read the notice that's out there. Councillor Demona.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you, actually, to His Worship. Would you mind rereading 4.1 in your form again, just so that we're clear if this does go to a motion right away? Because I thought provide was in there, and I didn't catch the word that you were substituting that with.
In addition to meeting all advertising requirements of provincial legislation and relevant trade agreements, the municipality shall make available to the local Jasper market notice of procurement opportunities issued through Alberta Purchasing Connection. And then 4.2 tells the world how we do that. But we make it available. We don't necessarily provide it. It's, again, semantics, but to me it makes sense.
I know I hate using it all the time, but it does make sense. Words matter. And to me, I thought those two to be the same, but I'm okay with how you changed it. So I guess with that.
Councillors? Somebody willing to make Councillor?
I'll do it. The committee, I move that committee recommend council approve policy B120, procurement policy, both B120 procurement policy as amended.
Deputy Mayor Keller-Hempy, I think that motion works. Just to be clear about the amendments, so we just discussed 4.1. There was also some discussion under the table. And I heard, so if the motion stood the way it was, these would be the changes I would make, the one just discussed at 4.1. And then under section 5, a reference to include, so under procurement process, a request for quotations, request for proposal, or tender must be issued, advertised, and posted through electronic tendering systems such as Alberta Purchasing Connection in accordance with NWPTA and CFTA, and follow the local notice provisions outlined in 4.2. So that would add that reference back up to 4.2. It would say, must, for things of this value, you must put it on Alberta Purchasing Connection as required, and you must do the things in 4.2. So it reinforces that reference. So I would add that. And then I also heard from Mayor Ireland under B, that same section, where it says a minimum of 3 written quotations or proposals must be received. I would maybe put a comma and then say subject to the application of relevant administrative procedures. So those would be the, under the motion that's worded now, which works perfectly, those would be the changes that I would make. And so I just want to confirm that there were those other 2 that I did hear from council. And if every council member is in agreement that those should be included in the proposed motion, that's what we would change.
Ireland,
I'm in agreement with all of that, but would add that last phrase after the comment would be applied to, we are dealing with section 8, and it would be applicable in 5B, but also 4B and 3B. There are 3 separate references to a minimum number of written quotations. And so in each case, I think you should add that phrase that says subject to relevant administrative procedures.
all of that the same part. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller MP. With those various changes, I'm really happy with how that's evolved. We still are missing a point about when we can trigger local advertising, and somehow I think we need to, at least in that broader, larger category, somehow maybe incorporate that into the procedure or process. Advertise, when it says advertising posted through an electronic tendering system. I'm just trying to think how we can best incorporate the opportunity for administration to ensure that we have a opportunity to advertise locally, just as a I think the overall intent of this whole discussion was to make sure we didn't miss anything. And then this is the one category I think I'm most concerned about. The other categories I'm not. But in this one, I think we owe it to our business community to make it available.
Yeah, absolutely. So the administration heard that concern. That's why my suggestion was that under, and probably this would apply also in 3B, 4B, or sorry, 3A, 4A, and 5A. So in each of those categories. So essentially every time there's a reference to Alberta Purchasing Connection in 3A, 4A, and 5A, we would add a line that would say, and must follow the local notice requirements under section 4 of this policy. So it's reinforces. So section 4 tells administration that anytime you put anything on Alberta Purchasing Connection, you must also do these things. Adding that to the table simply, I think, reinforces that. It's almost if a person only looked at the table, then they would say, oh, I better look at section 4. And when you read section 4, it tells you to look at the table. So it's there in both places. So that's certainly what I had intended based on your previous comments. It doesn't specify all of the steps because all the steps are contained in section 4. So it basically says, if you're on Alberta Purchasing Connection, you must also follow the local notice requirements in section 4. Would that satisfy that concern? We could specify all of the requirements of section 4 in each of the sections of the table as well, but it would seem to be sort of redundant if we've got it sort of covered both directions.
You have,
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller, MP, and Mr. Given. I think you captured then the spirit of what my intention was, and I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Councillor Jamil.
Just a quick question. Clarity on what we're actually suggesting here and including what Mr. Given has stated about the additions to the procurement process in 3A, 4A, and 5A. With the smaller amounts, even 5,000 to 10,000, is that going to require more administrative work as we go through that, like, as far as that goes?
Go ahead, Mr. Gibbon.
It would, except that the policy, and again, that's been around since 2019 and is, I think by all accounts, been working quite well, provides administration some flexibility to choose whether or not something's added to Alberta Purchasing Connection. So if you actually read the procurement process under section 3, which is goods and services 10,000 is 74,999, a request for quotations or request for proposals may be issued. So it's not a requirement to issue something on Alberta Purchasing Connection at that step. But basically, the model that we're working under here as proposed is that when Alberta Purchasing Connection is used, then the municipality must do these additional things. It doesn't say that Alberta Purchasing Connection must always be used, because there are some situations where it simply doesn't make sense to go through that bureaucratic sort of administrative process. It's quicker, easier to call around town, find who can do something, and what the prices are. And so, Councillor Demoda, I think I appreciate your sort of concern about, are we adding more bureaucracy? The answer is no. The policy still maintains enough flexibility. It really is that connection between when you use Purchasing Connection that Jasper locals might not know about, then you must also do these other local notice things. So those two things are tied together.
Go ahead, Councillor Jamil.
So just want to make sure that everyone is clear on the amendments to section 4 of the policy, as well as the matrix, including reference back to administrative procedure and the loop back through to number 4 from the matrix itself. Good.
All right, Councillor Ronan.
It is clear, but I do want to correct a reference, which I think was a slip. You referenced $5,000 to $10,000 in your initial comments. If I heard correctly, that's not part of this conversation. It's only when the Alberta Purchasing Connection may be implemented. So I think, unless I heard wrong, you mentioned contracts of 5 to 10. Those aren't part of this conversation.
Sorry, you're correct. I thought you were going to give me brief on the 9999 instead of saying 10,000.
Any other questions? Any other, Councillor Rex?
I'm still feeling, thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller, MP. I'm still feeling a little bit uncertain around the timing piece. And I agree that simultaneously is a kind of a strong word, but I wondered at the same time, because the way it is currently written, if the day before it closes, you posted something, it would be okay. So we've removed the reasonable notice, but we haven't addressed the concept of when, and I wondered if that is a concern to anyone else. So I wondered if the word at the same time is less around the same time.
Go ahead, Councillor Devon.
I appreciate where you're coming from, Councillor, and I think we have to put some trust in administration, and you know, when we talk about best practice, things like that, there are certain things I think you have to assume, and I wouldn't assume any amount intent and not having that there. So, you know, sometimes you can't get to things right away. I understand that. Maybe that's the reason that initially why reasonable was in there, and all of that can be interpreted. Maybe that is a good word to have in there, because one day before would not be reasonable. However, I think with everything else that all our other policies that we have provide administration to act with integrity, and I think that was the whole intention. So I'm okay with how it is, but the rest of the council, if you want to see some changes, I can be happy to for that amendment. It doesn't matter to me right now. It does, but it doesn't that way.
I can live with it, I just needed to say it.
Yeah, I think it's good.
Any other debates or a call question? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller. We're happy just to respond to Councillor Waxer's evident concern about timing. It might be possible under 4.2 to have the opening statement A and B, and then a phrase that captures them both, concluding phrase, as nearly as possible contemporaneously with advertising on Alberta purchasing connection. I mean, you just don't want a delay between one and the other. You want to know that everything is going to roll out more or less contemporaneously, not simultaneously,
Yeah.
but without any undue delay, right? So I could see how we could add a concluding phrase to 4.2 to capture the intent that it is expected to be as closely as possible contemporaneous.
Councillor
I don't think I would have even had a response to it, except that when we took out reasonable notice, it felt like it was missing.
Deputy Mayor Keller, MP, in the spirit of plain language, may I suggest that could be accomplished by adding under 4.2a, posting links to all procurement opportunities issued through Alberta Purchasing Connection on the municipal website within 5 days of being issued on APC. You can say 1 day, 2 days, but that's very direct. It is clear to every reader what the intention is, and it doesn't leave any subjectivity. So you can, I think 5 days, 1 day, I mean, I think it probably will happen simultaneously. But if council wants to define a timeline so that you can feel confident that there is a requirement that it will be posted ABC, and then shortly following, within some defined time period, it will also be these other actions will be taken, then I think that might be the best way to handle it. And it does eliminate any subjectivity. I don't believe that administratively it's a significant number of steps that we need a whole bunch of time to do. So really, if council said within 24 hours, then 48 hours, then 5 days, any of those are fine, but I think they're much more clear for any reader.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Everybody's happy with the motion? Go ahead, Councillor Devon.
Yeah, is everyone happy with that suggestion? And it is gonna come back to us next week for us to move through, so if there are any after minute thoughts or unclear wording in there, we can absolutely adjust it at that time. But I do appreciate crafting motions through consensus, but it takes a little longer. It's fun.
Ms. Acorn, do you have everything you need for that motion? Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Council. 7.2, Global Covenant of Mayors and Climate Energy. Mr. Freeman.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Keller-Empey. So on June 13th, the committee directed administration to investigate the costs and benefits associated with Jasper applying or agreeing to become a member of the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate Action, and return to committee of the whole with a report. This is that report. The Global Covenant of Mayors, well, I'll use that term, or maybe the covenant, is an international alliance of cities and local governments committed to addressing climate change globally. The initiative was launched in 2016, and by their website, brings together over 10,000 cities worldwide, building a localized network of communities that are supportive and working towards addressing climate change. In Canada, and you'll notice that the name is slightly different. In Canada, it appears that if I can use this term, the Canadian chapter of that entity or the associated organization is the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. So there's a slight nuance to the name. And so if you will find the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate Action, that's the international body, and the associated Canadian entity is the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. And I believe that they've merged maybe recently, and so there may be a larger name change happening. But if you notice a bit of a discrepancy, that's why. There are currently 47 members of the covenant in Canada. Of that, only 2 are in Alberta, those being Edmonton and Canmore. They're the only 2 municipalities that have signed up to this stage. There are some expectations of members. They are expected to develop a greenhouse gas emissions inventory. They're expected to assess climate risks and vulnerabilities of their communities. They are expected to define climate mitigation, resiliency, and energy targets, and they are expected to create full climate action plans. So there are not actually any direct costs to the municipality of membership per se. So, a membership fee of blank dollars per citizen, but there are expectations of members which would imply that the municipality would direct the work of the municipality if we intend to meet the commitment of joining. There are obviously some benefits to joining. The municipality would have access to resources and expertise. That network of 10,000 communities across the world would obviously be a benefit to the municipality. The potential to access workshops, webinars, and other collaborative initiatives would help build our capacity in working in these areas. And it would also, I think, highlight the municipality's efforts with respect to climate change and environment within our sphere of authority, which would obviously, I believe, meet council's strategic priorities and be something that would be recognized and appreciated by our local community. As I mentioned before, there are those expectations of actual actions we'd undertake. Broadly, the Canadian chapter identifies those as key data and plans. The ones described above will be made publicly available. But the municipality's goals and work need to be consistent with the principles around energy access and urban sustainability in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. That member municipalities will report on their progress against their commitments on a regular basis. And that the timeline for the municipality to start to submit a plan is 2 years from joining. And specifically, the members need to establish a target covering, the municipality for greenhouse gas emission reductions. So joining itself doesn't have a cost. But joining does imply that the municipality will do certain work. This work is in alignment with work the municipality has already undertaken. We received a grant from the Municipal Climate Change Action Center under the guidance of our previous municipal energy manager to work towards a climate risk assessment vulnerability. So that work is actually underway right now. We have discussed setting greenhouse gas emission goals. So none of these things are really outside of the work that the municipality might expect to do. It should be noted that making that commitment would essentially build a body of work for administration over the next 2 years as we work forward to meeting those commitments that are implied by joining. And as administration, we want to ensure that council is aware that outside of the partially grant-funded municipal energy manager position, which has been vacant for the last while, the incumbent resigned just due to life matters and moved out of the community. So we've been working on filling that position or deciding what we would do with our partners in Hinton. But there is no dedicated resource other than that position that would be focused on doing these types of initiatives. So council should be aware that if you undertake this, well, in any case, administration at the fall budget intends to present council an opportunity to consider how we resource our ongoing efforts around energy and environment. Council is aware that we proposed a full-time continuous municipal environment and energy manager position. We received late notice last year that we would get a second year of funding. And so I think council wisely made the decision to say, well, let's continue on with that second year of funding. Administration will bring forward again the opportunity to say, well, that grant funding is now going to be running out. There will not be a third year of grant funding. And it appears that there is work that the municipality would like to be doing. And so you'll see that budget, and the work that's listed above in the report is obviously a significant amount of work that the municipality will need somebody to be guiding those efforts. So administration is recommending that council actually refer the matter of joining the Global Governance of Mayors for Climate and Energy to a committee meeting following the 2024 budget discussions. So in essence, I think in fairness, council should say, we just need to decide now with this knowledge how we're going to resource our efforts around energy and environment, and subject to those resourcing decisions, decide whether it would be worthwhile to join this organization. Committee alternately could recommend the council approve joining the covenant at this time, and then you go into budget knowing that you made that commitment and given that direction to administration, and that may inform your budget discussions. So you kind of do either or. Administration certainly isn't going to come to a committee meeting and propose that you make a decision now that sort of binds the decisions that you have to make in budget. And that's why we're recommending that it be referred to a meeting following the budget discussions.
Thank you for that, CEO Gibbon. Questions from council? Mayor Reynolds.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Again, thank you, Mr. Gibbon, for the report. And I certainly personally accept the recommendation. I understand how you got there. I brought this forward based on a session I was at FCM in Toronto earlier this year. And for a couple of reasons, because it goes back, in fact, to a conference that Mr. Gibbon and I attended in November, I think, of last year, the Canadian Tourism Industry Association conference. And this is, as the briefing note indicates, really about reputational value. And it's the reputation of the destination. It seems to me that as the industry, and particularly I think the local industry, moves inexorably towards regenerative tourism, we can better position Jasper tourism to market our community by taking a recognized stance, and not just words, but something followed by action. So as I see it, one of the benefits of an entity such as the Global Covenant of Mayors is that there is some internal accountability. You have to have a plan. You have to do something. There are some benchmarks along the way. It's not just we will be green statements and then hope for the best and piecemeal your way along. This is important work. We lost the opportunity by choice to not have an environmental committee, and I haven't seen much come from any other community conversation focused on the environment. But this is very big picture stuff, but I think it would help to build the reputation of our destination as a destination which will be increasingly attractive to the traveling public who are interested in what they can do to help restore natural environments. So there are all sorts of positive benefits that I can see, but I understand entirely administration's pause to say, okay, let's take a look at what this means in terms of capacity and cost. Not that it costs to join, but we will have to have a plan and we will have to adhere to that plan. So delaying it until after budget is certainly, I think, a prudent move, but I think it still requires our firm attention because it does, I think, help set this destination up in a way that enables us to help Tourism Jasper in a way that they cannot achieve on their own. A marketing agency cannot join the Global Covenant of Mayors, but we can do that and they can use it. So with a pause for reflection, I'm content with that. And I really do appreciate the report. And we'll look forward anxiously to see what comes out in budget deliberations and perhaps committee work after that. So thank you, Mr. Goodman.
Councillor. Check this. I'm going to work as answers.
Sorry, I did check my mic, but I can't get on. Thank you for this. I agree with Mayor Ireland. I think it would be incredible to be a leader in climate and energy, considering especially where we live in a national park. Is there any opportunity to involve Parks Canada in this in any way? I know it's their strategic priorities are as well climate, energy, environment. Like I don't know if that would be something to consider.
Deputy Mayor Keller for Councillor Hall. So just to refocus the conversations about joining the Global Covenant of Mayors. So it really is municipally focused. You know, the commitment is the municipality committing to an international organization, joining sort of along with other municipalities, cities, to use that term. And the commitments are for the municipal organization to do these things. Would the things that we would do naturally interact, and engage with Parks Canada? I think yes, they most likely would. We certainly wouldn't presume to do things outside of our scope that's allowed under the agreement for local governance. So we wouldn't be. We certainly don't have the authority to make commitments or impose rules or regulations outside the town site. And so there's sort of a narrow area where the municipality, I believe, has the authority to act to guide its own operations and how we wish to behave as a corporate entity. And that's within our authority. The decisions that we would make about how our rules and bylaws and programs impact the environment may connect with Parks Canada, but we also have significant decision-making authority within, our own scope. So it's sort of it's not as direct an answer as I'd like to give. I think the answer is no. There wouldn't be a need to participate with Parks Canada, but this work, because it is climate and environment, really knows no boundaries. And so as long as we're working within our own authority, I think this is something that council is totally in control of. And as we would progress with doing any of this work, Parks would be a natural partner that we would engage with and consult with.
Senator Ireland, I presume you moved that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Empty, I have to make a motion that the committee refer the matter of joining the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy to a committee meeting following the 2024 budget discussions.
Any more discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? I'm going to call 10-minute recess. We'll reconvene at 10:45. Welcome back, everybody. I'll call the meeting back to order at 10:45. And now we'll move on to 7.3, policy review, mission statement, and respect the dignity, Mr. Gibbon.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Keller-Harvey. Director Nadon is going to handle these two items. They're coming from the Legislative Committee. So Director Nadon is going to handle these two policies.
Thank you. Sit on.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller-Harvey. Good morning, everyone. As Mr. Gibbon outlined, these policies are here after having been reviewed at the Legislative Committee. And I would encourage committee to consider each motion separately. There are two policies on the table here, and for simplicity of process, maybe proceeding with them individually would be best. And so after a couple of rounds of discussion and some edits at committee meeting, the committee agreed to forward these policies as amended to committee of the whole for review. And essentially the mission statement policy was revised to give each new council an opportunity to revise the mission statement at the beginning of each term of office. So the mission statement that you see there has been the same for quite some time, and then council could decide to maintain it or change it. And also we've added a purpose statement and some responsibilities, so to be just a bit more in line with the current format and have a bit more information in the policy statement itself. And then the respect and dignity policy was revised to have a stronger focus on the expected behavior from members of the public towards staff. So it is not so much meant to be internal facing as a policy, but more so to guide the interactions between the public and our municipal staff. And one of the key changes is in both physical and virtual environments. So how we see that online with some of our members of the public would also be affected. And again, we added a purpose statement, a scope, some definitions, responsibilities, so just fleshing out the policy a bit more. And we've also included as attachments the original policies, so you could see what was the original version and where things went. And you also have some members of the Legislative Committee sitting at your table, so I would call upon any of them to provide some information or answer any questions, and I'm happy to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Thank you for the work on this, the Legislative Committee, and yourself, Mr. Dunn. And now I open it to questions from council to Mr. Dunn or to members of the Legislative Committee. Councillor Dunn.
Thank you. Particularly on the respect and dignity aspect of these two, I appreciate the mayor really helping out on some of the wording here. And I really enjoyed having the conversations about, setting our staff up for success, but also give them a level of protection to, what could happen sometimes in the workplace. With that, in regards to the respect and dignity policy, did we not talk about having dignity as part of the definitions in number 4 at one point? Just I thought that we addressed that had been missing, and I just wanted to make sure that the actual definition was there, even though it was discussed as kind of a broad understanding. Do you recall that at all?
Go ahead, Mr. Dunn.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller-Harvey. Through to Councillor Demota, I did not have a note to add a definition of dignity in my notes from the legislative meeting. There was a conversation around civil versus courteous is something that I spent time looking into, and even consulting some colleagues to see, how they felt that term would be received. So I think we've changed that word in the definition of respect, and It's also included under responsibilities, so there was some semantics that do matter that were considered, but not a definition of dignity that I had in my notes in any event. So not to say that it didn't happen, but not something that was on my radar for an update.
So, okay, I appreciate that, and I thought, just at one point, and we might have not had much time discussing that, but because the policy is called the respect and dignity policy, and I thought that maybe that definition, we should come up with that before we really approve it, if that is the desire, Council. Thank you.
Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller, MP. Did the legislative committee look at expanding the policy to be respect and dignity and inclusion? As that we do have a municipal policy, I believe, for that as well. And it seems odd that we're not also in this particular policy speaking about inclusion.
Deputy Mayor Keller, MP, there was discussion about that at the committee. And I think the determination was the municipality has a policy on inclusion in the workplace, and that policy guides that work. The respect and dignity policy, the 105 that we're discussing today, is really about the municipality's engagements and the municipality's expectations for behavior as we interface with members of the public. And so inclusion is a bit different about how we build our own internal workforce, what steps we take to ensure that our workforce is diverse and inclusive and supportive of diverse perspectives. So there's slightly difference. One is about how our organization interacts with members of the public. The other one, the respect and dignity policy, inclusion policy, is focused on our efforts. And we have an entire master plan around that area. So I think for those reasons, it was an intentional, it was recognized, it was intentionally excluded because it was recognized that those concerns were addressed in greater detail in another policy and in that master plan.
Great, thank you for that.
Marion.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller. If I could just add to that response to Councillor Melnick's inquiry. We did look at that specifically and thought that inclusion was better dealt with in the internal policy where it belongs. The intent of the respect and the dignity is public facing in the sense that our employees, whether in a physical workspace or a virtual workspace, are absolutely entitled to be approached with respect and dignity. And we can't demand from the public that they come in with an attitude of inclusion, but we can say if you're in our facility, you will treat our staff with respect and with dignity. So we limited it to that and added, well, firstly, and I thank staff for coming up with the wording for the virtual environment, because it so much now happens online, and we are now better positioned to demand that in a virtual environment, our staff are still entitled to be treated with respect and dignity, whatever a member of the public may think about inclusion. So that is why it is restricted to respect and dignity, and importantly, establishes consequences if you don't treat our staff that way. So I think a logical reason to leave inclusion where it is and excluded from this particular policy. If I could speak as well to the mission statement, I am particularly happy with the changes that have come forward from the legislative committee on this policy. The policy is long-standing, and it came to my attention September of last year when I addressed the Federal Electoral Boundary Commission. And another speaker argued vociferously against the position that I was advocating, saying, well, Jasper doesn't even count because I've looked at its mission statement and it's just too, basically the suggestion was immature, although that was not the word. But the important point is that this is council's mission. This is not a mission statement for the municipality. This doesn't define the work of the organization. This encapsulates council's mission, and our mission is to provide open, honest, and accountable government to the residents. And it hasn't changed for years. We don't think it should change. It guides council's approach to decision making, as the purpose statement says, based on the foundational principles of democracy. And so I can proudly say that we follow this and have for decades. Our decisions are made in this venue and in our council meetings, which are open to the public and now available live, so people can stream and they're taped and people can watch on our YouTube channel. They can see the process of local government in an open way. And that's incredibly important. And open and honest work together, honest in the sense, not of dishonest, but not disingenuous. They get to see us having debates, as some would say, sometimes making sausage, which isn't always that attractive, but they get to hear us debate important issues like the procurement policy that we just went through. They get to see that live. In other forms of government, people don't get that. I think it is critical that we have those terms as a mission statement for council, again, not for a municipal organization. And through that, we gain trust and accountability. The purpose statement, I think, summarizes all of that in excellent language, and I thank administration for coming up with that wording. But it is, I think, an important policy. The suggestion was initially we don't really need it, and we didn't really need the respect and dignity, but that through discussion, the legislative committee determined that these are both really beneficial statements and get to the essence of what we want from our council and what we expect from public behavior toward our staff. So I am fully supportive of the changes to both of these policies and happy with the work that the legislative committee did, but more so the work that staff did in fine tuning this for the benefit of the council.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Wexler.
I was just wondering about the overarching statement on respect and dignity. I wonder, I find that by including the word public, it waters down the intent of the policy. But so as I feel like workplace and public don't belong necessarily in the same sentence. I wondered if other councillors had the same reaction, that in order to establish open, welcoming, and effective workplace environments for staff would be more appropriate. Well, that's the only one? Okay. So I guess that's the only. Okay, yeah, it looks like some change in them. I apologize.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I do think that dignity might be good to have it defined in there. And I do agree with Councillor Wood. I can't actually remember if we discussed that when, because respect is defined, I think dignity should be defined as well.
Councillor Demona.
I agree, and I think we touched upon it, but didn't come up with an actual definition, so. I do have one, and with other wordsmiths in the room, I could take a crack at it and see where it lies. And it just came through putting together some from the Oxford Dictionary, through the definitions. So, if I may, if we want to include the definition of dignity, the common serious manner of importance and value to be honored and respected by people in the workplace. The common serious manner of importance and value to be honored and respected by people in the workplace. Or maybe even given to people in the workplace. Again, this is a recommendation to council, right? So if we come up with something better in the next week, that's okay too. Or we could ask the administration to come back with the definition.
Everybody's in agreement that we should add the definition to the committee. I agree with that. It's good. I want one.
That definition or a definition?
A definition. All right.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I wonder whether the chair of the legislative committee might be interested in making a couple of motions.
I would love to. I will start with committee recommend council approve policy B-102 mission statement as presented.
All those in favor? That was carried.
And then I'd also move that committee recommend council approve the policy B-105 respect and dignity as amended with the definition of dignity.
Questions today? All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. So these will be back on the 15th. Excellent, and I expect that maybe administration might have a definition for dignity and has come wordsmith it, or so we will prepare the legislative committee. Great, thank you. And now we're on to 7.4, Jasper Municipality Assets Study. Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Kelleher. I wanted to speak briefly about the Jasper Municipal Leasehold Asset Society for a couple of reasons. It came up in a discussion fairly recently with our CAO, and it occurs to me that not everyone fully appreciates what it is all about and whether it is still needed. Earlier today, Councillor Waxer and I signed off on an annual return for that society. And we have been doing that now for 28 years or something like that. When this society was created, it was at a time when our community was in considerable flux. We had a town committee with moral authority and absolutely no legislative authority whatsoever. We had just lost our local school board through regionalization, and we had properties within the community that had been paid for by local tax dollars through one form or another. And I, back in those days, invented this awkward name to capture exactly what I intended. Municipal leasehold assets that belonged in the community that had been paid for by the community. I mean, we established a society and transferred a number of properties, including some health properties, because Jasper used to have a health authority board locally elected as well. So we transferred those into a society that would, by definition, be controlled locally. At the time, it was by members of the elected town committee. And then we transitioned to an improvement district and now a municipality, but the history remains with us. And the intent at the time was to protect those properties from seizure by any other order of government, whether it would be the province or the federal government, because we did not have a municipality at the time. We've kept it alive and continue to hold a number of properties in the name of the society. The balance sheet is always zero because the society takes in no money, spends no money, but it is on title to a number of properties. I think after 22 years of municipal existence, we are probably feeling fairly safe that we're not going to be eradicated, and we could potentially transfer those properties to the municipality itself. Because eventually, the history that I have with this society is going to be lost. And I can try and inform others of it, but it might be that we no longer need it. And so my motion is simply to refer to the legislative committee a request to consider the possibility of dissolution of the Jasper Municipal Leasehold Asset Society, including the legal, political, and financial implications of such dissolution. So I think we should just take a hard look at whether we need this anymore. I don't think we need to discuss it at the council table, but the legislative committee is, I think, an appropriate venue to take a look at whether this society continues to have a place in the community and in the municipal organization, and come back at some point with a report forecast. And so a referral to the legislative committee is all I'm suggesting.
Thank you, Mayor Evans. Any questions from Mayor Evans? All the questions, everybody in favor of referring this to the legislative committee? Great, that's carried. Thank you. Motion action list, Mr. Gibbon.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Keller MP. There are some updates to the motion action list that administration would like to recommend. The first is under S block parking. Director Madon has advanced all of the items that were essentially directed to administration to start administrative work. So those have been started. Those included renewing leases with Parks Canada, developing a maintenance plan, and bringing forward recommendations for capital upgrades in 2024. So all those things are in the works with administration. And as we need council motions or endorsements or whatever, then they would come forward. But the administration suggests that those could be removed because they are underway. Moving down a page or two, there's the item on policy B20, procurement policy revisions. That was delivered today, so that one could be removed. As with the global covenant of mayors for climate action, that one could be removed. Of course, it will be replaced by the referral item. So the June 13th item can be deleted, and then there will be a new item that will come on. The public transit contract item from July 11th, where council directed administration to undertake some actions. I provided an update to council by email. I believe you all would have received that. And so that item has been concluded. The paid parking correspondence. The first part of that motion was that council received the correspondence for information and that council directed administration to respond to those. And I believe administration has followed up with that particular residence. So that item has been done. There were sort of further policy discussions around the inclusion of Geeky Street in the future. And as we discussed at the meeting, that's something we would bring them forward to council for consideration following the conclusion of this year's paid parking program. And then finally, the Jasper Folk Music Festival is approaching very quickly. There were the motions with respect to the municipality sponsoring at the diamond level, and that how we would sort of fund that sponsorship. Administration's already been in touch with festival organizers, have provided them this guidance that we would fund them $2,500 in cash, up to $2,500 in gift in kind in terms of facility rentals and other items. If they were tickled pink with that, we are going to formalize that into an F-104 agreement. It'll probably be very, very simple, but that action has already happened. And so the remaining item that will need council direction in the future is who's going to represent the municipality. And that's a decision that would be at the October organizational meeting. So those items that I noted, the ones that administration is recommending could be deleted. Those would be the changes that we propose council support by motion today.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Do you have a member of council that's willing to make a motion on the motion action with the updates? Simone?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller-Murphy. I move that the motion action list be accepted as amended based on Mr. Gibbons' report to items that have been completed.
Thank you, Councillor Malik. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Councillors, upcoming meetings. Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller-Murphy. I have next Wednesday, I believe, a breakfast meeting with our MLA, Mr. Long, the Minister of Tourism, Mr. Scholl, and David Goldstein, who is both, I think, the CAO of Travel Alberta and a Deputy Minister of Tourism. So all three will be in town. I'm going to have breakfast with them, and tentatively, at least, we're going to do a tour of the new facility. There was grant funding provided by the province. Our MLA, Mr. Long, was instrumental in making sure that we got that grant funding. The Minister of Sport and Tourism, I think, will be interested to see how we're spending the province's money. And Mr. Goldstein, I think, interested in tourism and the impact of our facilities on the tourism product that we offer. So next Wednesday morning, I think it's that scheduled breakfast.
Thank you, Mayor. Tomorrow I will be attending the Evergreen and board meeting that was postponed from June, and it'll be by Zoom for 2 hours. We move on to upcoming events. We have the public hearing is for the control corporation at 1:30 August 15th here at the Forum Room, and I presume that our council meeting will follow, Mr. Gibbon.
Deputy Mayor Keller-Murphy, actually, administration was just discussing this, and yes, and the public hearing may happen within the context of a council meeting. So yes, they'll both happen at the same time. You may just find that the agenda starts with the call to order of the council meeting, and then an item in the council meeting is calling to order the public hearing and closing the public hearing, and then you move on with the rest of the council meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon, for that clarification. With Jasper, you had to start with citing homecoming, August 27th, 29th. Jasper Chamber of Commerce AGM, August 31st at Pyramid Lake. Jasper's Crisis Team Fundraising Golf Tournament, September 8th at Jasper Park Lodge. Jasper Folk Music Festival, September 8th and 9th, Commemoration Park. Alberta Tourism Advocacy Summit, September 25th in Calgary. And the Alberta Municipal Convention and Trade Show in Evanston, September 27th to 29th. Any other events to add? Councillor Melvin.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller-Murphy. This will be an event that may not make it in, maybe into the minutes, but tomorrow, August 9th, is the 75th anniversary of international peacekeeping by Canadian Armed Forces, RCMP, and provincial and municipal officers. And they participated in international missions around the globe. August 9th was chosen as the day to recognize the international peacekeeping, as that was the day when 9 Canadian peacekeepers died in an accident in 1974, representing the greatest loss of Canadians in peacekeeping duties. So I'm sure there'll be a recognition of that at the Canadian Legion tomorrow. The second item I'd like to add is we were recently contacted that we have a significant event coming up on August 19th. And that would be related to our steam engine, the 6015. On August 19th, 1923, the steam engine was the 16th steam engine to roll off the assembly lines in Kingston, Ontario. And it was the last of the specially produced mountain engines right after CN was amalgamated. And we are very fortunate that through the efforts of individuals like Harry Holm, we have only one of 5 steam engines on display in the country. And I'm assuming that, I'm hoping that there'll be an article in the FITSU regarding this particular event. And I would invite individuals to join me on the August 19th at about noon at the brew pub for a pint of 6060 stout, which recognized another steam engine that we had here in the community. So just an interesting note, Tourism Jasper has done a wonderful job and coordinated getting lighting on that. There are railway organizations. We've used that engine for raising funds in the community. And I think it's appropriate that we recognize the significance of that particular tourism asset that we have, which is a static tourism asset, and is quite often used by people to take pictures. And the third thing I'd like to add is the Culture Days on September 16th and 17th, which have recently been advertised by Habitat for the Arts. And I think it's appropriate that we have that at our upcoming events.
Thank you for that, Councillor Martin. Any other? Now we have an in-camera topic, and will we be returning to the public on that matter, Mayor? Okay, so I would like to thank the public before we go on camera, because we will not be returning to our Zoom platform. Thank you for joining us today. And now I would like to ask the Councillor for a motion to go on camera at 11:16. Thank you, Councillor Wexler. All those in favor?